4 seconds left. Melvick stolen away. He's got time. Atkinson, layup. Good! Good! Anthony Atkinson at the buzzer. Barton is your national champion.
Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hey.
And today, in honor of March Madness, we have a story for you that is a story for the ages. A story that if it had happened to any D1 school would be something that goes down in legend along with NC State's 1983 title run or any of the other magical stories of the time. And you don't have to take my word for it. Ian Eagle, who you just heard in our intro, who was on the CBS call that day, said if that whole sequence played out at the Division I level, it would have gone down as the greatest championship game in college basketball history. Because it's Division II, it flies under the radar, but it doesn't take away any of the drama from the moment. And in fact, to this day, Ian Eagle has never called another Division II basketball game because he said that he had had enough after this one. But the story is much bigger than the part. Some of you've heard that audio clip before or aware of it, but the story is actually much deeper and bigger than that would indicate. Blake, what do you know about Barton College's 2007 national title run?
Few things. You reading that article gave me chills. Put that out there. Secondly, if this championship game was played in the spring of 2007,
yes,
I was a junior in high school. I know that the tournament run, not just the final game and the audio clip you just heard, the great ending, but the tournament run was similar to that. There were multiple games, at least more than one, where Barton came back from a deficit at the end of the game to miraculously win. Like, that wasn't the first comeback of that tournament alone. I know that for a fact. And of course, what you just heard, the final ending and being down so late in the game and stuff. I mean, it was really such a, I get chills every time I watch it. Getting chills just reading that article, just something about those sports moments that will stick with you forever. Like, when I was in high school, when it happened, it mattered nothing to me. It didn't mean anything because, Division II basketball, woohoo! Like, that's how I felt about Division II basketball at the time, coming from Durham, being a Carolina fan. But like, I don't know much about this story. I'm really interested now.
Full disclosure, as we're telling this story, we are homers. And so there's going to be some bias here. We both are alumni of Barton College. I was there as this was happening because I'm more seasoned than Blake.
Wiser.
More experienced. And so I have kind of firsthand memory. So just acknowledging that bias as we tell the story. But go ahead and strap on in wherever you are, because this is a really good and really interesting sports story that doesn't get told because it's Division II. And before we get into it, I just want to point out, it's such an untold story that, having lived through it, a lot of what's in here is memories because the records are missing. Conference Carolinas, Barton College Athletics website, the NCAA's website have all been updated over the years, and a lot of the game recaps, the box scores, the schedules themselves are missing. The Wilson Times, which is the local newspaper for Barton College, when we got to researching the actual finish to the 2007 season, we uncovered that from January to July of 2007, all of their papers you cannot find anywhere digitally. You have to get them on microfilm from the Wilson County Library to access them. But only those 7 months. Everything in like an 80-year span is there, but those 7 months not there. So it's one of those things. It's just overlooked outside of this big moment. But all right, you ready? You ready for some?
I just put my seatbelt on and I'm ready to go.
All right, tie it up real tight. Some background information about Barton College. If you don't know, it is a tiny liberal arts college here in North Carolina. Just about 1,000 students at the time, still about 1,000 students. I think the enrollment's actually gone up a little bit. It's a D2 school, which is rare for a school that size to be a D2 school. You'll often find them D3 because D3 you don't have to give scholarships, and so you can kind of manage your money a little bit better. But it's a D2 school. It's not unique in North Carolina, though. North Carolina is either third or fourth in terms of number of D1 schools in the state. So a lot of our schools are already D1. So some of the smaller schools have room to operate in that D2 space. We're going to start our story not in 07, but in the 05-06 season, where Barton was picked to finish fifth in the Carolinas Virginia Athletic Conference. We're going to call that the CVAC from now on. It's going to sound like we're working on some air conditionings, but it's not an HVAC. It's a CVAC. That conference used to be and is now, again, known as Conference Carolinas. A lot of history in that conference. Check it out on Wikipedia, but schools like Appalachian State, East Carolina, Western Carolina, at one point were member institutions of Conference Carolinas. We're picking up the story in 05-06 because Anthony Atkinson, a native of Wilson, transferred in to Barton from Campbell. He was a star at Greenfield School, which is a local private school, before going to Campbell, and actually had some success in Campbell. In 04-05, he was actually fourth in the Atlantic Sun in assists per game and total assists. And so he was really successful there. Started 10 games as a freshman, started over 20 games as a sophomore, but it just wasn't his fit, and he was looking to come home and do something different. And as you may know, or maybe not, if you transfer from 1 to 2, if you transfer down a division, you don't have to wait a year. You're eligible immediately. So he shows up on campus in 05-06, ready to play immediately. Mount Olive College, which is going to be Barton's main rival, and think on a lesser scale, think Duke, Carolina, but on a lesser, smaller, local scale. Very local and smaller scale. Not taking anything away from it. But their rival, Mount Olive, was picked to be the conference champion. They were the defending champs and had made it all the way to the Elite Eight. And this is where I'm going to mention, just for our storytelling purposes, so that we're all operating on the same fundamentals here, the Division II tournament works different than the Division I tournament does. So the D1 tournament is 3 weekends. You're kind of in little 4-team pods as you go through, right? The first weekend, you play a little 4-team tournament, and all those teams go to the Sweet 16. And then you play in a regional 4-team tournament, and those winners go to the Final Four. And then obviously there's 4 teams there to play for a national championship. The D2 tournament, the whole country is broken up into 8 regions with 3 conferences in each region. And those regions all host 8-team tournaments. That's important for our story because in D1, a school like NC State or Carolina or Duke that's playing in the ACC, on a normal year, we can anticipate 7-8 teams going to the NCAA tournament from the ACC. Under these rules, where there's only 8 teams in a region getting in, if you're 3rd or 4th in your conference, you're sweating it out. There's no guarantee that you're making it. So the margin for error in D2 basketball is very slim. A 500 record is not good. You're having to win 20 games. So that's just a difference right up front.
Very interesting how the different tournaments work. I don't know why they all aren't the same, but it just goes to the money and the publicity and the attention on Division I basketball as opposed to Division II. I did want to mention, when he says Duke, Carolina, on a much smaller scale, think like high school gymnasium, but packed like Cameron. It's really small, really hot, really tight, but for some reason the students really don't like each other when they play in basketball. So it is pretty intense. I mean, it doesn't have the history of a Duke Carolina, but it is pretty intense for Division II small town basketball.
Forget basketball. I don't like those Mount Olive people in general. We ain't got to just be talking about basketball.
Oof.
My church gives money to the to Mount Olive College because it's the same kind of denomination, and like I always am just like, oh, is that something I really want to do? I can't. That's not. That feels wrong.
It does feel wrong.
So anyway, I just wanted to give everybody that kind of thing that it's tense already in Division II basketball because it's just a tighter window of opportunity. In 05-06, the team played in something that was kind of interesting. The season opener that year was played in front of a crowd that was estimated to be bigger than the previous season's biggest crowd. And the team had done nothing. They were picked to finish fifth. No real reason for it to be as full as it was. But the fact that they had Anthony Atkinson and also Errol Frails, who was from Greenfield as well. So two local kids being on the team helped the community kind of buy into it. It's not something you would normally find. It's not something that keeps happening, but there's two players from Wilson on the team. And so Wilsonians show up in droves. Eventually, by game number 4, this is the other thing that's interesting about D2 basketball. They're playing conference foe and nationally ranked Pfeiffer. They were 14th in the country coming into the game in the 4th game. We see college coaches in D1 complaining in the ACC, for instance, that they've started putting conference games really early in the season, and they're like out of their minds upset about this development. But here in D2, it happens just like that. From the get-go, you're playing big games.
Just another big difference between Division I and Division II, how D2 schools are. I mean, they didn't seem to have any negativity against it. They were like, yeah, let's go for it. Why not? Right? Like they don't care. But this win would propel them nationally, so it actually worked in their favor, right?
Yeah, these big games early on are important, and it did. It moves them to number 12 in the country by virtue of beating number 14 Pfeiffer. That's actually the highest ranking to that point in school history. They'd only been Division II for about 10 years. Prior to that, they were an NAIA school. Naturally, in the beginning of that year with a national ranked team, 2 Wilson kids, crowds started to fill up the Wilson gym. That's not a hard task, but
not difficult.
But crowds started to fill it up to the point where the Wilson Daily Times wrote a kind of satirical article asking the school for better parking because things are just getting out of hand at the Wilson gym.
There's not much parking on campus. Like I bet like they had to have been lining the streets around campus just to get in there.
It was crazy.
What does that gym hold? 1,000 people?
1,500 give or take.
1,500 capacity? Yeah, like I mean, so you got to think like if you've got 2 local kids and you're a decent nationally ranked basketball team, you've got students living on campus, a few hundred of them coming to the game, right? Plus all the Wilsonites, whatever you want to call them, Wilsonians coming to the game, and there's not a lot of space. I mean, campus is what, 4 or 5 city blocks square? Like there's not that much space. So they had to be parking on the streets all around campus just to come in here.
Yeah, it was tight. I can tell you that. It was certainly, that part was certainly high school-esque. The parking situation for sure. By early January, they beat number 9 Mount Olive, the defending conference champions. And I forgot to mention earlier, the team that had represented the East region in the Elite 8 the year prior to this. As a matter of fact, the CVAC in the 6 years prior to this had sent 5 schools to the Elite 8. So they're the powerhouse conference in the East region. But they beat number 5 Mount Olive for the first time in over a year. They had gone 0-3 the year prior, 87-82. So they notched their second win over a nationally ranked opponent. They had lost a couple of games in between, so that victory pushed them back up to number 13 in the polls. They would eventually jump up again to number 12 in the polls by January 18th. It was after this Mount Olive game that we start to get imagery in the local paper of giant killers. Mount Olive was a taller team, a bigger team. Barton's center at the time was 6'6", and which is not short. Michael Jordan is 6'6", though, so we're not talking about like really short for D2 basketball, but still undersized even for a center in D2. And so this idea that they could really take it to a bigger team and hold their own, and it's a small school, and the point guard happens to have the name Ant, right? All of these things start creating this imagery of giant killers.
Such a cool name. Like I would take that. I would take the term giant killers any day. I mean, especially being looked down upon, being such a small school, a small team and stuff. Like I would take that and run with it.
Yeah. January 20th. So you're going to start hearing a couple of different rankings as we go through this story. The national rankings are important. They're big. We're going to talk about them. But the one that really matters is your regional ranking, because those are the 8 teams, 1 through 8, that make it to the NCAA tournament. And so January 20th, Barton debuted at number 3 in the East. So a solid position, not anything to start counting your chickens on, but a good spot to be in by virtue, again, of these 2 big conference nationally ranked wins. That next week, they beat Queens and Limestone, 2 conference schools. They go up to number 10, and they get a buzzer-beaten win against Belmont Abbey, not their first or last that we'll talk about, but that eventually puts them all the way to number 1 in the East. They are on fire this season. They can't, I mean, everything they do, everything they touch just works out. In conference, they started the year 17-0 and clinched the regular season title at that point. 3 games left to play. They are the conference champions for the first time in 9 years. So just they're on fire.
When you've got a win in hand against nationally ranked teams like Mount Olive and Pfeiffer, who they had beat earlier in the year, that's just mind-boggling. With 3 games left to play, they're still undefeated in conference, and they clinched the title with 3 games left.
Yes, and everything is working out. They are number 3 in the country on the poll that came out the day after Valentine's Day, February 15th. They're number 1 in the East. Everything is looking up. And as sometimes happens with college kids, when things are looking up, it's when you start to take your eye off the ball. They lose 2 of their next 3 games to end the season. The first time they would lose at home comes in this stretch, where they lose on senior night. The building is packed, reportedly the largest crowd to ever be in the Wilson Gym on senior night. They saw a 13-point deficit with 5 minutes left, and Barton came storming back, down 13. They come back to tie it, and a shot is hit at the buzzer to lose.
That hurts.
It does. It does. One thing that you would think, because in a D1 situation, again, we keep making these comparisons, but in a D1 situation, you've won your conference, you're 17-0, you're looking great, there's nothing really to play for. But in D2, there is something to play for. The team that is number 1 in the region gets the first opportunity to host the regional tournament. So you're really playing for home court advantage in the NCAA tournament. That's not something we get in D1 directly. You can be scheduled in places that are favorable to you, but to actually play on your home floor in front of your home fans that you can sell tickets to, that's not something that happens in other, D1 sports. And that was what was on the line. And they kind of blew it there with two losses in 3 games.
Yeah, that's got to be tough because you're riding high at number 3 in the country with 3 games left, and then you lose 2 of 3, especially on senior night at home with 1,500 people in the building. That's got to feel terrible. Like that had to turn around at some point, right?
Yeah.
I don't know the story. I'm just hoping it turns around.
So everybody in Wilson's hoping it turns around too, because they've gone on this ride. They're invested. They're clearly showing up. In the conference tournament, in the first round, it looks like some more of the same. They struggle all game against the 8 seed Coker before finally eking out a 75-72 win. That win does seem to be the get right game for them, though, because in the second round, they go to town. They blow out their opponent and make it to the finals easily. So their second round game, they get back some of that magic, which is good because they're going to face for the third time Mount Olive College. It was a win in game 1, put them in the national picture. They won a close game in game 2, what we're going to call a normal basketball game, just kind of back and forth, but they pulled away. You'll see why that's normal in a little bit. This conference tournament final is one of the best basketball games I've ever seen. It goes to double overtime, and in double overtime, it's decided at the buzzer. Barton hits a shot to go up 102-100 with just a few seconds left. Mount Olive's able to come down the floor and get off a shot of their own that bounces off the front of the rim and the back of the rim before finally falling out. So it had been a tense, tight game the whole way through. And finally, Barton is able to pull it through in double overtime to get the win the CVAC championship. Most importantly, it cements them as the number 1 seed in the East Regional. And so they will get to host the East Regional that year.
I'm having flashbacks of watching basketball games in that gym. I wasn't even there for this, and I can just imagine what that felt like. I kind of mad I wasn't there.
So let's get to the East Regional. It's going to be hosted at Barton. And in the first round, they're going to face Wheeling Jesuit. So at the time, get ready to hear some schools you've never heard of. This is great. I love it. I love it so much. Most of the other conferences, the 2 other conferences, they're not most. The other 2 conferences in the East region, where Barton was at the time, were schools in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, that area. So Wheeling Jesuit, the game started off well. Everything was going great. And then with 8:08 left in the first half, there was what sounded like a gunshot in Wilson Gym. And I'm not exaggerating. It sounded like pow, and like everybody needs to hit the ground. What had happened? I've never heard of this before, never seen it before, hadn't heard anybody say anything about this since. So they were going down the court. Behind them, the backboard exploded. Didn't shatter, didn't fall apart, just exploded inside of the actual casing. I don't get how it happened, other than the fact it was about 120 degrees.
So the glass just spontaneously combusted?
Yeah, there was nothing. Somebody, there's a lot of like, well, I think it could have been the heat, no air conditioning, and it was the middle of like April, so it's warm, and we're all standing on top of each other. Somebody suggested, during the layup line, somebody smacked the backboard. Maybe they had a ring or something on and it chipped it. And so then it just, matriculated its way through, and it's under pressure in there. So it just exploded and stayed still. But it was the craziest thing. Everybody's looking around, and finally people start pointing to the backboard, and it's literally, you can see it like a mosaic inside the actual casing itself, but it never like fell to the floor. So it wasn't like a Shaq dunk and everything just crumbles. It was just pop, and it was there. Weird.
That is that's so weird. That's so weird. And yeah, that gym, does it have AC now? Because it used not to, and it was miserable.
They renovated it. Unfortunately, we've not had a lot of time to experience it because of COVID. They renovated it last year, and it's got air now, but it used to not. No, it used to have nothing.
Ooh,
and it had fans.
good
It had
night.
fans, but you can't run fans during a game because you start blowing the ball around, I guess. Not after. So it was hot. It was hot. You go to a game in December, and it's 10 degrees outside, and it's hot.
The doors are open, and it's still hot.
They eventually, this pushes all the games back a day because the process for putting the new backboard took until well into 3:00 in the morning. So I'm glad they pushed the game back as quickly instead of making everybody stay there. Eventually, Barton's going to easily beat Wheeling Jesuit, as you would expect a 1-8 game to go, and they are awarded with a second round opponent. Can you guess who they're going to play in the second round?
I'm not looking at the notes or anything, and I'm going to say it's Mount Olive just because that seems to be a theme.
Mount Daggone Olive is
it really
the second round opponent. So we get our fourth time. This leads to one of the best crowd chants I've ever heard. So Mount Olive College, it's Mount Olive University now, or University of Mount Olive, who cares?
UMO, I think.
But it's Mount Olive College at the time, the initials MOC. And what they would do is they would chant MOC, MOC. That's their chant. Well, the Barton students playing Mount Olive, there's like a dude with like the nets that I think he actually got the actual net from the conference championship, which was played at Mount Olive. So it's Mount Olive's nets. So we got people wearing nets around their necks. And the students start chanting MOC 0-3.
Ooh.
Because that was their record against Barton that year. So we get a fourth opportunity. You know Mount Olive is coming for Barton in this situation, and they deliver. Barton did lead by 4 at the half, but Mount Olive would open the second half leading the scoring 40-25. So they just go on a tear to start the second half. With 5:59 left, the game was 75-64, so a 9-point lead with about 6 minutes left. Junior Alejo Baravero from Argentina, who was all-conference that year, hit a 3 to cut the lead to 75-67, and I lied, 75-64 is 11 points, not 9. So he hits a 3 to cut the lead to 8. Here are the next 3 Mount Olive possessions. Turnover, basket, turnover. Baravero is fouled twice on those ensuing possessions. He makes 2 of 4 free throws. He also gets another basket on the third possession. And so they've gone on a little mini run, 4-2, and the game is 77-71. Mount Olive's going to turn it over 2 more times, and Barton's going to nail 2 more baskets, both 3-pointers, to make it 77 all. The game at one point was 75-54. 75-54, 21-point lead, and Barton's going to end the game on an 18-4 kind of miracle run to end the game. You could see after it was over, like Mount Olive players, like just physically distraught that they had played so well. They had led for most of the game, or at least most of the second half, and still couldn't pull through.
I have a feeling the comeback part will become a theme, and especially beating their rivals 4 times in the same season. But this just goes on to speak to the clutch factor, if you will, if you can call it that like they were never really out of a game. It doesn't seem that way anyway. Like they never seemed to be so far away that they couldn't come back.
Yeah, after this game, and actually let's get to the next game, because this one fulfills your promise of the comeback being a theme. Barton, after that game, they were clearly drained, understandably drained. They were playing this hot gym back-to-back nights at this point because the games have been pushed back. They had to just dig in and come back against Mount Olive, and it's just kind of a struggle in the final against Alderson Broaddus. Alderson Broaddus is the name of the school. With 7 minutes and 18 seconds to play, the lead is 58-43 Alderson Broaddus. AB is up 58-43, so 15-point game with 7 minutes to play. A senior named Justin Diggs, who hadn't really played that much, comes off the bench, and he immediately nails a three to make it 58-46. And that's going to spark Barton to win that stretch, right? The under 8 stretch to the under 4 timeout. Barton goes on a little 11-6 run to kind of chip into it. So they were down 15, now down 10. And Alderson Broaddus goes to 2:08 to play, up 8 points, and then just doesn't score anymore. Barton's fouled with 2:02 left and makes 2 free throws, so the lead's 6. 2 seconds later, Alderson Broaddus turns the ball over, and Alejo Baravero makes 2 free throws to cut the lead to 4. The next possession, they turn the ball over, and Barton nails a 3 to cut the lead to 1. The next possession, Justin Diggs steals the ball again, and they nail a layup. Barton takes the lead. The next possession is a steal with 2 made free throws. The next possession is a steal with a made free throw. Alderson Broaddus finally gets a shot off, misses. Barton nails 2 more free throws. AB gets a garbage time 3 at the buzzer, and the final score is 73-70. Barton wins. Barton went on a 19-3 run in the last 2 minutes, a 30-9 run in the last 7 minutes to come back from 15 down.
Yeah, this is bananas. This is just already so crazy because like they just, no matter what, they just couldn't lose. Like, I don't know what it was, but the end of the second half, I don't know what Ron Levency was giving them at halftime or on the bench in the second half, but I hope he doesn't stop.
Yeah, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. It just isn't. It can't, right? This is the game. I've told this story before, but this is the game I was at with my dad, and it's the regional final. There's a bunch of people here that have not seen any Barton College games all year, but they bought a ticket to come to this game, like just kind of plasticky bandwagon situation, but we'll take anybody that's there. And it's these old guy behind us, and it's at one of the timeouts, something happens, and it's like they had chipped away a little bit, and then AB had like put the lead out to 15. I think it was actually the under 8 timeout. We got dudes across the way chanting, "We believe." We, like, just the cheesiest way possible, but cool. And these dudes behind us are like, man, they're just tired. They're give out. Boy, they ain't going to get it done. You can't blame them, though. They've come a long way. And my dad, just like a real genteel man, but he turned around. He said, look here, I've been watching this team all year, and this is what they do. And they can still win this game. Now, you can either cheer for them or you can sit there and be quiet. And I don't care which one you do, but pick one and like just turn back around. And I was just like, oh, okay. All right.
I can just imagine your face like, oh my goodness.
Like in my head, I was like, I'm normally the one that says things like that. I love this. All right. We're going to the Elite 8, which is the D2 version of the Final Four, and they're going to face this white-hot Winona State team, who is one of the best teams in the country, obviously a much bigger team and a much bigger school. Barton's got 1,000 students. I think Winona had 17,000 students. They are a D1 size school playing D2 basketball, probably because they're from one of those flyover states that nobody cares about. Barton played a normal Barton game, leading at the halftime. They led by double digits in the second half, but eventually fell behind. With 34 seconds left in the game, senior Brian Leggett, who was the undersized but full of heart center, nailed a layup to tie the game at 70 and was fouled, but he missed the accompanying free throw, and the game went to overtime, where Barton lost and came home with nothing. So an L to Winona State in overtime ends that 05-06 season.
That's so unfortunate because, well, I mean they did so much to get there, of course, and they were behind so often that it's like okay, like it's like they were bound to lose at some point. Like as bad as that is to say, at some point you just got to think that might just be all they had. But
The miracle's
yeah,
got to end, right?
at some point, like those runs can't last forever, or can they?
Foreshadowing.
Well, that's how this season ended, but the story isn't over. Thanks for listening to part 1. If you enjoyed this episode, just you wait. Part 2 is now available, so literally just scroll up and take a listen. We'll be waiting. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.